Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. We have with us tonight Randy Walker, a sports marketing, communications, and media specialist and the manager partner of New Chapter Media, based in New York City. Randy is most noted for his work in the tennis industry, highlighted by a 12-year stint in the marketing and communications division of the USTA that featured work on 13 U.S. Open championships, 22 U.S. Davis Cup ties, and 3 Olympic Games. SportsIllustrated.com went as far to label Randy as the Roger Federer of tennis publicity. We are privileged to have him on with us tonight. Please welcome to the pod, Randy Walker. Randy, thank you for taking time and sharing some of the most incredible experiences you've had in the tennis world.
Well, Dave, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for what you're doing for tennis. I think really how people are going to grow this sport in the United States and around the world is doing things like podcasting and blogging and tweeting and, representing themselves at tournaments and so forth. So the work that you're doing with your podcast is really doing a lot to, promote and develop the growth of tennis in the United States. So kudos to you.
I appreciate the kind words. And the people in the tennis world, man, we all love the sport, and anything we can do to push and promote it, we're going to do it. So we see the great work in your background, and eventually we'll post this up to the YouTube channel, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But this is obviously a very unique time, not only in your life, but everybody's lives. What have you been doing to stay busy right now?
Well, I'm actually down in Vero Beach, Florida, which is where I also live in addition to New York City. So, I've been doing a lot of, writing and publishing work with New Chapter Media. We're a premier book publisher of tennis books and publish, books like coming book, Pete Sampras' Greatness Revisited by Steve Flink, which is looking back on a great career of Pete Sampras. And, we've also been very busy doing stuff with the Mardy Children's Foundation, which is one of my clients. And we are raising money for children in Indian River County, Florida, and, planning for our upcoming Mardy Children's Foundation tennis championships. So still a lot of work to do. You just got to make the best of it. It's not the greatest, opportunity to get a lot of work done, but you just have to make the best of it with the time that you have. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for touching on those topics, because we're going to dive a little deeper in all those topics that you just mentioned. So a lot of people obviously know you for your incredible work in the media industry and all the stuff that you do at New Chapter Media and your prior experiences. But, you were quite a tennis player. You played at the University of Georgia. And for people that know college tennis, Georgia has been a powerhouse. So obviously you had some talent. How did you get started in the sport, and how did you do during your junior career to get recruited to such a powerhouse like that?
Well, I'm actually the greatest player in the history of the University of Georgia men's tennis team to never win a match. I was actually 0-7. I was the Rudy, the movie about Notre Dame football player Rudy Rudiger. I was the Rudy of Georgia tennis. I was 0-7. There's only been one other player in the history of the University of Georgia who's played and never won a match, and that person's name is Greg McGarity, who just happens to be the athletic director for the University of Georgia. He was 0-1, I was 0-7, so I think I'm worse than him because I lost more matches. So I'm very proud that I'm the all-time losingest player from the University of Georgia, and I'm here in Vero Beach, Florida at the Boulevard Tennis Club. This is my condo right next to the Boulevard Tennis Club in Vero Beach, Florida. And a member of this club happens to be Michael Pernfors.
Yes.
The all-time greatest Bulldog. So here at the club here, we have the all-time losingest and the all-time greatest Georgia Bulldog here in Gator Country in Vero Beach, Florida. But I will say, really, I was so privileged to be a part of the University of Georgia program. I went there with no intention of playing on the tennis team. I really wanted to go there more because it's a communication school. I grew up in New Canaan, Connecticut. I played number 5 on my high school team. And I played some hit and giggle matches with a gentleman named Bob Troop in New Canaan, Connecticut, who was friends with Dan McGill, who was the legendary coach of the University of Georgia. They crossed paths at University of Georgia for a little bit and also in the Marines in World War II. And Bob Troop put me in touch with Dan McGill. I walked into the office on the campus the first day, first week at the University of Georgia. I didn't know a soul. Went into Coach McGill's office, asked him if there was a JV team, because here it was the fall of 1987. Georgia was #1 in the country. They had just won the NCAA championships the previous spring. They had the greatest recruiting class, perhaps in the history of college tennis, with Al Parker, Chris Garner, and Francisco Montana, 3 of the top 5 juniors in the country. And Al Parker was the greatest junior, in the history of USTA tennis. They were freshmen. We had a full team coming back from the NCAA championship team. How the heck was a guy that couldn't even, barely play singles for New Canaan High School in New Canaan, Connecticut, make the team? So I asked Coach McGill, well, do you need a manager? And he goes, well, we certainly could use a manager. So I did, win the walk-on tournament, but there were, 13, 14 players on the team. But I was lucky enough. The only reason they kept me around was because I volunteered to be the manager. So I picked up the balls. I drove the van. I picked up the lunches for the players. There was one funny thing where every time somebody would hit an overhead over the fence at Henry Field Stadium at the University of Georgia, Dan McGill would always bellow out, "Randy Walker, ball over." That was like one of my duties. But that freshman year at Georgia, the team was riddled with injuries. Pretty much every starter was out with some sort of an injury. So Coach McGill called me in his office, and he said, our team is so desperate, we may even have to put you in the lineup if things get any worse. So I signed all the papers to be, officially eligible for the team. I didn't play a match, but then the next year, Dan McGill had retired, and Manuel Diaz took over as the head coach. Manny is still the coach at University of Georgia now. But the team shrunk from being about 13 and 14 to being 7, 8, 9 players. So I went from being, 13, 14 to being number 8 on the team. And in those years in college tennis, the format was different, where you had 6 singles first, then you played 3 doubles afterwards. So it was 9 matches, and a team could clinch the match in singles. So because there were so many injuries the year before, if Georgia had clinched the match in singles, Manny was always a little bit worried about injuries and so forth. So, it didn't really matter the doubles. They were, dead rubber, so to speak. So Manny would put me in with the other walk-on, Scott Lewis. He would put us in at number 3 doubles. So that was a big cushion. I was very lucky that I was able to get into these quote unquote, dead rubber matches. But Manny was so cocky against Virginia Tech my sophomore year that he actually started me at number 6 singles. And of course, I was the only one that lost. So, but I was there for 2 years. I was 0 for 7. After my sophomore year, I realized, I had my chance to play. This was a great opportunity. I wasn't going to get as many opportunities in my junior year as I was going to get my sophomore year. So I decided, I really needed to get more media experience and journalism experience. So I left the team and I joined the Red and Black, which was the student newspaper for the University of Georgia. And I covered the men's tennis team for 2 years after that. So that was a big part in me, gaining media experience and, helping me launch me into the media career that I have in tennis today.
Oh, thanks for sharing all that. And look, I don't care if you didn't win a match at Georgia. You had an incredible 2 years experience on that team. Not many people can say that. And you mentioned Michael Pernfors. I know he was a little bit prior to you coming. He won back-to-back NCAA titles in 84 and 85. And he followed that up, I believe, on his rookie season on tour by making the finals of the French Open the following year in 1986. And then I believe, and I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, there's a guy that was a Chicago legend, and he's older than me. I do not know him personally, but he was a legend. He won state all 4 years in a row. Your teammate, Mike Morrison from Deerfield High School. Mike's father was a coach at Deerfield for a very, very long time. That family is like I said, it's a legendary family in Chicago.
Yeah, Mike Morrison, Mo, as we all called him, was a great Georgia player. He was on the 1987 national championship team. Played anywhere from 4 to 6 on the team and kind of anchored some of those big wins. And what a tremendous guy! I have so many great memories of Mo at practices and van rides. Driving around the Southeastern Conference, and now he's a very successful paddle tennis player and entrepreneur, and he has his own clothing line. I believe it's called Machete Tennis. But if you play platform tennis, you should definitely Google Mike Morrison, Mo Morrison, and check out all of his apparel and all the offerings that he has in platform tennis. So Mo's a good person, and happy to be still connected with him on Facebook, and we go back and forth a bit, with great memories of Georgia tennis.
Oh, that's great. So you kind of did the transition for me in an easy way. So I appreciate that. You played tennis for 2 years. Your junior and senior year, you start writing for the student newspaper, is what that is. And then your career starts to go towards that direction of graduation. What were some of your first couple jobs? And then we'll obviously lead into some of the coolest experiences ever at the USTA.
Yeah, I think, as being a student, you want to gain as much experience as possible. Certainly I was, writing articles for the paper and just meeting people. And, I saved up some money and bought one of those old Tandy computers to send stories to newspapers. And, I would call at the NCAA tournament, I'd call the Daily Northwestern and say, hey, would you like to do some stories on a Northwestern tennis player named Todd Martin, who's in the NCAA tournament? And, they would send stories to me. Sometimes they'd pay me, sometimes they wouldn't, but I would just try to get clips and experience and meet people. And, one of the persons that I met in the press box at some of the college tennis tournaments in the NCAAs was a guy named Joe Lynch, who was the media director for the Intercollegiate Tennis Association, the ITA. And Joe Lynch recommended that I potentially work in the press box at the U.S. Open as just like a worker making copies, whatever, and through a bunch of phone calls and faxes back in the day, was able to connect with the USTA. Bruce Levy with the USTA, who hired me in the press box for the U.S. Open in 1992. And you just meet people. That's just the main thing. It's just getting a bunch of experiences, getting bunches of clips. I also worked as a volunteer person in the media room at the Volvo International in New Haven, Connecticut. No pay, working 12 hours a day in the press room, but you're just in that environment and you're meeting people. And it's not necessarily that you're going to get a job right there and there, but just meeting people and forging relationships, and then doors, open. So I worked at the 1992 U.S. Open. There I met the new director of communications, a woman named Paige Crossland, who, really liked me. And then 6 months later, I'm working, full-time for the USTA. So that's kind of where, all that happened. But all the people that I met through college tennis and through, Georgia and the press rooms and so forth, that really, led to me getting the full-time job at the USTA, which I was there for, from 1993 until 2005.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have enough days, weeks, or months to talk about all your awesome experiences here. But I do want to talk a few of them. You were the press officer for the U.S. Davis Cup team from 1997 through 2005. You worked in the 1996, the 2000, 2004 U.S. Olympic tennis teams. 96, Andre won gold. Lindsay Davenport, I think, also won gold. Then you had the Williams sisters. They won their medals later on. You covered, you had good timing here. You covered the greatest generation of U.S. tennis players in history. Talk about some of your favorite experiences doing that.
Well, I think 96 Olympics was a big one for me. That was really my big first, opportunity to work on the, international team. Obviously everybody worked in the press room at the U.S. Open, but, for me to kind of own a project with Olympic tennis and so forth. And I remember that first press conference there in Atlanta, and the team was, it was Andre Agassi, Mal Washington, Pete Sampras was injured, pulled out. Billie Jean King was the women's captain. and Lindsay, Monica Seles, Mary Jo Fernandez, Gigi Fernandez. We had this big press conference. Everybody got asked a question in that first press conference except Lindsay Davenport. Nobody asked Lindsay Davenport a question in that first press conference. She quietly goes through the draw. She's beats Mary Jo Fernandez in the semifinals, and then she's playing in the gold medal match. Juan Antonio Samaranch, the head of the International Olympic Committee, comes to the tennis event. He's thinking he's going to be putting the gold medal around Arantxa Sanchez Vicario's match. She's the heavy favorite to play Lindsay. Lindsay goes out there, beats Arantxa. That was really her coming out party, her first, big win in her eventual Hall of Fame career. And, we did all the media tours, MSNBC, CNN, Sports Center, all in downtown Atlanta. And I remember, I think it was CBS Evening News. We had a hit on the top of a building, and we had to go through a metal detector. And Lindsay was wearing, jean shorts and her, USA sweat top, and she had to go through the metal detector. And then beep, 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 beep. She lets off the metal detector. And then the security guard goes, "I'm sorry, ma'am, you have to empty your pocket of any metal object." So Lindsay reaches into her front pocket and pulls out this glittery gold medal, puts it into that little, Petri disc on the side of the monitor there. And then the security guard just goes, "Whoa, look at that." That was kind of a fun memory. And obviously working with the Williams sisters and Billie Jean in Sydney was great. And then 2004 with Patrick McEnroe and Mardy Fish, of course, got to the finals, lost a heartbreaker final to Nicolas Massu. So that was great. I love Olympic tennis. I love Davis Cup. I mean, those are my tremendous memories there. And like you said, we could probably have about an hour and a half podcast just with all of that. But those were near and dear memories, and those are events that I still love today.
Personal story. I don't know if you were there, but an early high school graduation present for me, 1992, U.S. Davis Cup semis were played in Minneapolis. I think it was at the Target Center that was just recently open. We drove up there from Chicago, and that was the dream team. Courier and Agassi playing playing singles, and Sampras and McEnroe playing doubles. They played Sweden. Stefan Edberg was on that team, and the U.S. won, and it was so cool. They actually won the U.S. Davis Cup at the time. I think they beat Switzerland in the finals. I think like in Fort Worth or something. The next round.
Fort Worth final. And I was so privileged to be able to work with Pete and Andre and Jim, and John was of course the captain of the Davis Cup team in 2000. Amazing stories there, going to Zimbabwe and Spain, and working with John. There's never a dull moment with John. And still do work today with Jim Courier with his Champion Series tennis, which was known as the Outback Champion Series, Power Share Series, and Vesco Series, the Champions Tour. So I still do some consulting with Jim, and a lot of those legends, play in those tour events around the world. So I do some consulting with them. So that's, again, relationships that you create, and they last so long, and they just open up opportunities for you. So
cool. So cool. So let's kind of get closer to being what you're doing today. Obviously, you've been a part of New Chapter Media for a while. New Chapter Media, just for the listeners, a background, it's a full-service boutique marketing agency with a specialty in sports. The company was founded in 1987 as really a book publishing company. New Chapter Press, which morphed into a sales, marketing, and publishing company in 2006 when you became managing partner of the firm. And that really became New Chapter Media, which offers marketing, publicity, sales, event services, in addition to being a well-established publishing house. You not only have authored several books, but you've also published several books. You've mentioned Steve Flink earlier. I've had Steve on the podcast, as you know. He was great. And Steve's had a couple books. I'm looking at one right now on the desk. You probably have it behind you. The Greatest Tennis Matches of All Time, just to name one. There's one that's coming out right now with Pete Sampras. I think it's called Greatness Revisited. And he talked a little bit about that book on my pod and how Pete was so good, and he just may have gotten lost on how good he really was because you have three other guys right now that are just off this planet at their level. So give us a little, background on your time there, some of the books you've authored and some of the books you've published.
Yeah, basically it was run by my late father back in the day, and he would basically be running the backlist for for the books there, and not really publishing any new books. But at the Heineken Red Star Cafe at the U.S. Open back in 2006, I believe it was, I was having a Heineken with Renee Stauffer, who was a leading Swiss journalist who I'd met at the Davis Cup tie in Basel, Switzerland in 2001. And he said, "Hey, Randy, I wrote this book about Roger Federer that I'm looking at an English language publisher for. What do you think?" So I talked to my dad. I said, "Hey, can we publish this?" He says, "We can publish this, but it's got to be entirely on you. You got to finance it. You got to oversee it. I'll give you the tools to do it, but it's all on you." So I took a dive and financed it and oversaw the whole operation. And it was an amazing success. We sold out of our first print run in 10 days at Wimbledon in 2007. And that was kind of where, things took off. And then the press room at Wimbledon, Bud Collins comes up to me. He's like, "So you're a book publisher, huh? I'd really like someone to take over the publishing of my, Bud Collins History of Tennis." So, I ended up publishing 3 editions of Bud's Encyclopedia of Tennis called the Bud Collins History of Tennis. And then I was having a birthday dinner with Bud, and he gets Rod Laver on the phone and says, "Hey, why don't we republish the book that Bud wrote with Rod in 1969 about his 1969 Grand Slam called The Education of a Tennis Player." So we published that book, and I'll tell you, the easiest way to get a book deal is when you own and run the company. So that's how I got my book On This Day in Tennis History published, because I kind of deal with myself. So, that started with, my work at the USTA and in documenting On This Day in US Open history, which is still used today, and on the scoreboards and in all the programs and so forth. I kind of say, like, now with Twitter and social media, and especially in this pandemic era, everybody's been, posting On This Day in tennis history anecdotes and so forth. It's probably the most referenced book in tennis history by now, between all the, tweets and postings about, anniversaries of tennis and so forth. But we're, the world's leading book publisher in tennis, just because I love tennis and I know how to promote tennis, and that's a joy of mine. So I take a lot of pleasure in working with these authors and getting these stories. I mean, everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated by stories of tales from the tennis tour and so forth. I also published Cliff Ritchie's book, Acing Depression, which talks about his life on the tour and him dealing with mental illness, and, very inspiring book. So it's a real joy, and it keeps me in the game. And, I also do other, consulting with tennis projects, Mardy Fish Children's Foundation, the Power Share series, the Invesco series with Jim Courier, etc. You asked me, one of the things I've been doing, during the hiatus, I was able to put together World Team Tennis with the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. I was the one that brokered those two entities together for the World Team Tennis season in 2020 to be played at the Greenbrier, which has been an amazing success. So, any kind of thing that I can do in marketing, social media marketing, press releasing, running tournaments and so forth. I get so much satisfaction out of running the Mardy Fish Children's Foundation Tennis Championships alongside Marty's father, Tom Fish, who's the co-tournament director with me. That's a $15,000 ITF futures event, which I get so much satisfaction out of. It raises money for at-risk kids in Indian River County, which, we raise a lot of money, for kids with that event. And you just get so much satisfaction seeing these players just starting to crack into the top parts of pro tennis. We had Denis Shapovalov at our tournament a couple years ago, and Francis Tiafoe, etc. So it's really super fun to see these kids play in our tournament and then watch them, play in the U.S. Open and Davis Cup and so forth in years to come. So, in some ways I get almost more satisfaction with that than, working at, a U.S. Open or a Davis Cup, etc.
Yeah, and you could go to that the Mardy Fish Foundation website to learn more information about the foundation and the event. Just The mission statement for the Mardy Fish Foundation is to provide children the opportunities to participate in safe and impactful fitness, nutritional, and enrichment programs, empowering them to live healthy lives. So again, they've had an event in Vero Beach, I think since 1995. Now it's being associated with the Mardy Fish Foundation. Randy has the hat on right now. Shout out Mardy Fish off the tennis court. Just won a big time golf celebrity tournament, a couple of weeks ago. And we all know how good a golfer he is. And he had not won that tournament previously, but he recently did. So shout out
we
Mardy.
Also do a golf fundraiser every January where, you can come down and, play a little with Mardy at the prestigious Windsor Club, which is where Marty's father, Tom, is the head tennis pro. And Yvonne Lendl is a member there too. He's quite a golfer as well. Paul McGinley, who's was a former Ryder Cup captain for Ireland. He's a member there. And we had Luke Donald there and some other celebrities. So every January, before Mardy plays in a celebrity golf event in Orlando, the Diamond Resorts International, Mardy comes in a few days earlier and plays that charity event that we have at Windsor. So, if you're listening and you want to have an amazing golf experience that helps kids in Indian River County, you can sign up for that as well. And our tournament in Vero Beach is traditionally held every May. With the pandemic, we got postponed, but we're going to be held later in the fall. So we're happy that we're getting another crack at it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. We can talk for hours, and if you don't mind, I would love to have you back on because you have so much to offer. So hope you'll take me up on that offer. But before we end, through your career, you've seen really go from print media to obviously social media. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that, how you transition from more print media. You obviously do both. Your views on social media, how you use it to your advantage, and maybe certain things that you don't really like about social media.
Well, I think that, when I was in the press room with USTA, there was just a big room of American tennis writers, and every newspaper, all the big newspapers had a designated beat tennis writer for their newspaper, and they would have notes columns twice a week. There'd be an article about tennis every day of the week, or at least once a week in all the major newspapers in the United States. And that started to shrink about the time that I, left the USTA. And that's really where then tennis blogs started, where people were writing blogs and, whatever, randystennisnews.com or, wherever. Everybody would start, creating their own, tennis specific websites. I created 2 tennis websites around that time, worldtennismagazine.com and tennisgrandstand.com, which I still run. And so tennis writing and tennis, kind of publicity and tennis media kind of went from the newspaper to the blog. And then I think it started to go more to social media, where people would have their own, social media profiles and so forth. And I think also podcasting is really getting big now, where you're seeing a lot more podcasts out there. So, the podcast is kind of the old tennis column for the newspaper, or, the tennis blog site. So that's kind of how tennis media has transitioned. I'm also a big golf fan. And I remember Paul Azinger, who's a former PGA champion and, now prominent golf commentator. He once described, Twitter as a sewer, just because there's a lot of negativity on Twitter, and there's a lot of anonymous people and trolls, and you have people, gamblers, writing awful notes to players, and so forth. So I don't really see it as a sewer. I see it kind of as a river that sometimes can be polluted, but sometimes it can be really beautiful. Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, these are just tremendous ways to maintain relationships. As I said earlier in the podcast, it's really all about maintaining relationships and creating relationships. I mean, you and I met on Twitter, and we started following each other, and hey, look at this. Now we're friends, and I'm on your podcast, and we have started a relationship through Twitter. I've met authors that have published their books through Twitter and through social media. You're able to promote your books, to promote your products on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and so forth. So I see it as mostly positive. the negative that you sometimes have to deal with. You just kind of have to kind of brush that aside. But I love the interaction with Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Tennis Publisher, Randolph Walker on Facebook, at World Tennis Mag, at Tennis GC, or GS. I got a bunch of different Twitter profiles based on the books that I published and so forth. So I encourage you to dive in deep in social media and just shy away from the negativity.
Great advice. And yeah, definitely go follow Randy, because he's a fun follow, and you learn a lot about what he's done. And again, you'll hear his love for the sport of tennis, and that's really the bottom line.
Shameless plugs for books and clients.
Yeah. Randy, thank you so much. This is so fun. And again, I mean, we could talk for hours. I'd love to have you back on again, and we can dive into, maybe more certain specific things. If you're willing to do that, that'd be great. With that being said, best of luck. You're doing great work. I love following you, and I love reading the books. And I know you got like we said, the Pete Sampras book by Steve Flink is coming out right about now. And hey, stay safe, stay healthy, friends, family, tennis players, and we'll get through this. It's just going to take some time. We'll get through this. Randy, thank you so much for
well, thank you for what you do, Dave. I mean, you're really doing a great job, with your podcast and getting the word out and interviewing, voices in tennis that deserve to be heard, with positive and inspiring stories that, aren't necessarily going to be on the front page of the New York Times or USA Today or the Washington Post. So keep doing what you're doing, and keep interviewing all those people from around the country that share the love of this game of tennis that we love so much.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much, Randy. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll get back to being on the court soon, real soon.
That's great, Dave. Take care. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.